Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. We're going to be painting Mortarion, finally. And here is all the paints we use for this entire project. Yeah, pretty sure. Including some of the parts that I don't show that I paint, and materials and basing stuff. I assembled the model up to the point that it would get in the way of painting, so his right and left sides of his cloak and stuff, including the gear and stuff that hangs off it, are in one piece. His legs are separate, his back loincloth with the little nurglings are attached, each of his legs are separate, his chest and body is separate, his arms are separate, his hands are separate, his weapons are separate. There was one nurgling that would hang on to his cloak that if I attached it, I felt it would have been really hard or in the way. Turns out, not so much. The wings are separate, and all the hoses and stuff are separate. I then primed it with Rust-Oleum flat gray primer because all I have is pure black, and I don't want the light blue that I have. So I've had this for a couple years. I didn't use it because it looks just like the model, but it's a light gray. It'll save me some time because I'm going to do a lot of dry brushing and pre-coating, and this will just save me time. And the only issue with it is it's very close to the actual color of the plastic, and so for a lot of the small pieces, it's hard to tell what I have primed when I do the other side. Alright, trying something new. I'm recording this before I do anything. I've already assembled and primed everything, pretty much. Now, I wanted to do this to give my initial thoughts on the model. Now, after the pre-assembly and all that stuff, I have found that it is pretty straightforward. This is a much simpler model than like Angron or Magnus, because there's only one version of this. The other models could have with or without armor, and he's actually pretty well divided into pieces. His wings are very separate. His cloak and stuff is really completely separate from everything else, so that'll make painting very easy. All his little bits and bobs, these random guys, are pretty separated. Even this piece, it is a completely separated, where is it? Here, or somewhere. Yeah, one of these. It's a separated piece, so it should be much easier to paint individually. As far as colors, the wings are one group of colors. The armor is one thing. His robes are purple, and then he has white robes, essentially. When it comes to organization stuff, he himself is pretty straightforward and simple. His random little details all around and stuff are going to be a little more complicated, but you can just make it up as I go along. Overall, it's organization-wise a very straightforward model to paint. In order of what I'm going to try to do, I mean, future me might change his mind, but I'm going to start with the armor first. Then once that's done, I'm going to go on to probably the wings, because they're cool. I mean, yeah, I want to get that out of the way. The robes are very straightforward. I'm planning on using, stipling to get them all, get them right, to make the robes have some texture instead of just individual paintbrushes. The weapons and all the other details will be last. I'm going to be trying to do speed painting techniques, as I think most of this is fairly straightforward and simple. I might end up finding out that it's just not looking good, and I'll just revert back to regular painting. But he, as a paint job, an overall thing to do and organize, he's very straightforward and simple. And it should probably be relatively easy to do. I don't know. Future me will find out if I was right or if I was wrong. This is future me. I was right about everything. The only issues were me trying to figure out how not to ruin what I've previously done, so I was being overly cautious. And now for some real painting. So with Pallid Witch Flesh and Pro Bold Titanium White, which is the only good white I've ever found, we're going to do the base coating. So with an airbrush and Pallid Witch Flesh, we're going to create the first layer of airbrushing. Essentially, we're going to spray essentially what is down, like at a 45-degree angle, to create the light color. The back of his legs, the shadows and stuff will naturally be created from the airbrush direction. We're not covering the whole thing with Pallid Witch Flesh, but the wings will be. I'll have to brush those later because they didn't really get airbrushed well. It just didn't work, despite me trying to be conservative with my paint and make sure all the excess paint would fall onto the wings. So apart from that, then I took bold titanium white and dry brushing, and I dry brushed a good portion of the model. So what I did dry brush was a lot of like his weapon, his melee weapon and stuff, to get like an idea of like the corners and edges first, and of course his armor, all his green armor and stuff, that was dry brushed as much as possible to pick out the details and all the little holes, caverns and crevices on his armor. Now with Castellan Green, Mournfang Brown, and Lamian Medium, we're going to paint the basics of the armor. So the green is going to be for the base of his armor, and Mournfang Brown is going to be the base of his brass, essentially. So we're going to create a wash with Castellan Green and Lamian Medium. Now, I wanted it to be a more thicker one, so I have a little plastic base that I use to see what the color is. I'm not painting my hand. I don't know why some other guys do that, but essentially it is a wash, but it's a slightly more thicker wash, and I apply it all over the green armor. And once that's done, I do the same thing with Mournfang Brown, but I want it to be very strong and thicker of a wash, so not too diluted. Good luck figuring that out, because it took me a few tries, but I just have a base or a piece of plastic nearby that I can test to see the consistency and thickness of it. Alright, with Eshin Grey, Steel Legion Drab, Rakarth Flesh, and Lamian Medium, we're going to continue painting. There's just so many details on the model that washes are probably the best alternative for doing this fast. So we're going to create a wash with Eshin Grey and Lamian Medium. We're going to start off thick, but we can thin it down as we need it. A little bit of water can help it flow better. So Eshin Grey is going to go on all the steel, the metal, the chains, all that stuff as a base layer. And the pre-coating we did, oh, I forgot to mention this earlier, but the chains are also dry brushed to pick them out. Once that is done, the Steel Legion Drab will be used to paint the shaft of his weapon. Yes. And after that, Rakarth Flesh will be used to paint the, I don't know what these would be called, well, the little straps on his grenades on his waist and the horns growing out of his backpack thing? Yeah. And after that, oh yeah, the Rakarth Flesh wash will also be used to paint a skull on his knee, as well as the base layer for the horns on his shoulder, and then we'll apply Steel Legion Drab as a wash, like mid-tone in between there and stuff. And that should be about it for these washes. Alright, now for the shading, with Plaguebearer Flesh, Seraph Sepia, Drakenhof Nightshade, Druchii Violet, and Lamian Medium to stabilize, dilute, give us better control over these washes. So one of the things I've noticed is that when I speed paint and I do my dry brushing, one of the first things that happens is in the final product you can kind of see the white edges. Now that's like the good highlights and stuff, and it changes its color slightly based off the paint. But no matter what, it is still pretty white. Like, the highlight is always white. It doesn't matter what the other colors are, this highlight is always white. And so that stands out. So I want to try something. So I took some Plaguebearer's Flesh, mixed it with Lamian Medium to stabilize the color, make sure it didn't have any like marbling effect, and just applied it all over the green armor. And this gave it a richer color, more yellower, more solid. It looks pretty decent. And with Seraph Sepia, dilute a little bit with Lamian Medium. We apply it to all the parts that are going to be brass, the armor and stuff, essentially, to add shadow, shading into there, give it more color, because I've basically given up on metals. Like, metals, I just can't seem to wrap my head around them, and so I find if I can sort of mimic the color of metals, or at least create a good base layer for future metal highlights or dry brushing, it'll be good enough. And I also apply this over his blade, add a little bit of the brown in it, just trying to follow the guide of the box. And with the Drakenhof Nightshade with a little bit of Lamian Medium, I didn't mention this before, but Eshin Gray was used on all the pipes and tubing, and so Drakenhof Nightshade is going to add some extra color to them and sort of bluish them. It has a nice effect, yeah. And I'm going to take Druchii Violet with a bit of Lamian Medium in it and just apply a few layers onto his staff, just to add some more color to it. And now with Nuln Oil, Agrax Earthshade, and Lamian Medium, we're going to add more shadow and stuff. So Nuln Oil, with a little bit of Lamian Medium to stabilize it, is going to go on all the metal parts. All the chains, his halberd, or what is it? His scythe, that's it. We're going to do a few multiple layers because it's a bit thin and we can have control. Some areas will be a little darker than others, but that's personal choice and stuff. And then Agrax Earthshade is going to go in as well and cover just a few areas on his scythe, some bones and stuff like that. Also note that he has a bunch of chainmail on his robes that I did not paint because it would get in the way of future painting. I can just go back quickly and redo that. Alright, with Emperor's Children and Carrionburg Crimson, so throughout his entire body, including the medals and his weapon, they seem to have weeping sores on them of some kind, like holes. Yeah, but they're kind of fleshy. So I'm going to take Emperor's Children and Carrionburg Crimson. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill the holes with Emperor's Children, then fill them with Carrionburg Crimson, and yeah, that's what I first did, so that's the first two videos, but then I realized that it's too sharp of a contrast compared to the rest of the model around it, and I looked at the cover art, and there seems to be a little bit of a transition color, so basically, I then added more Carrionburg Crimson, but like in the general area of the hole, spilling out even, to help like a bit of the color transition. It looked better, I think. And then with Emperor's Children again, I basically put a dot of the Emperor's Children where I guess the light would go into a hole and lighten that up. That's what I was thinking, and that's it. Alright, with Seraph Sepia and Rakarth Flesh, I go back to the horns on his shoulder, or yeah, pretty much, and basically I apply 2 layers of Seraph Sepia with a little bit of water, so one layer towards like halfway up it, and then a layer like 2/3 up, and then I just highlighted the edges with Rakarth Flesh. I just saw it, like, looking back and realizing that it could be a little bit better, so this is me just fixing something. With AK Interactive Ultramatte Varnish, I decide that I'm just going to focus on completing sections of the armor instead of all of it in pieces, all together essentially. So I'm going to apply AK Interactive Ultramatte Varnish onto his weapon, yeah, all over to before the metal steps, and also the purple that's on his blade. It's basically the same thing as the swords, it's just the pink, then a wash, then pink highlight, wash, and repeat until satisfied. Alright, with Vallejo metal colors, steel and duraluminum, which is basically a dark metal and a bright silver. So here's what I did. So I took the basic steel, and I decided that, so all the paints and the washes and stuff built up basically the shadows, the coloring, the details like this. But the metal, I think, could possibly be like, so what I do is I take the steel and I just paint straight lines all along it. His halberd is like in different sections, like face plates. So I do horizontal lines on one, vertical on the other, and I alternate. His blade has a bunch of stripes or streaks on it from the blade inward, and it seems to have better reflection. Basically, like hundreds of stripes reflect better than just a flat plane of metal, and so it seems to be brighter. And I basically, with the steel, I apply this on all the parts I want to be kind of metal-ish. I still leave a good portion not metal. And then with duraluminum, I then apply it, highlight like the edges of each plate of metal on his halberd, a little bit more streaks onto his chainsaw teeth. Oh, and I also do this, his spikes that are on his armor with steel, and then highlight them with duraluminum. And yeah. Alright, with Hashut Copper and Sycorax Bronze, we're going to do the, well, brass. So essentially what I'm going to do is with Hashut Copper, I'm going to apply this on all the edges, and I'm going to cut a bunch of stripes into the metal. On his armor and stuff, that's basically what I do, a bunch of lines, and it makes it brighter. And as far the like orbs and like round, like literally brass balls all around, I'm going to highlight the edges, and I'm going to do a bit of overbrushing, which is close to dry brushing, and so that the upper areas or flat plates will be shiny, but you can still see all the shadow, depth, and color transition of all the pre-coating we did. And then with Sycorax Bronze, I'm just going to highlight the most raised, most prominent areas of each of these things, like sharp points, sharp edges, stuff like that. And the brass looks pretty decent. And now with Agrax Earthshade, Serapsephia, and this oxide color, we're going to add some more depth and shadow. So with Agrax Earthshade, watered down quite a lot, I applied it onto the armor. Essentially, it wasn't as shaded as I would like. There wasn't as much depth. So what I did was, on each individual piece, I would cover it all over with a thin, watered down layer of Agrax Earthshade, and then with a hair dryer, I would blast it. And the Agrax Earthshade would go straight into the recesses a bit because it was pretty thin. It would hug on all the places it needed to. And because the hair dryer was at the correct angle, it would blow away from the most top raised area, so there was a nice transition. It worked out well, but it's only because of this type of model that the Agrax Earthshade could flow into the recesses. So it surprisingly worked out really well. And with Serapsephia, we basically did somewhat the same thing. We just colored some of the metal, the steel and stuff, added some more flavor. This is being artsy right now and trying to add some extra color here and there. And then with the oxide color, I apply this in small little nicks and dots and stuff on all the brass pieces, essentially. Alright, moving on to the wings now, because the armor and weapon is done. With Bold Titanium White, Koala Green Shade, Serapsephia, Druchii Violet, we're going to paint, well, the wings. So we're going to dry brush bold titanium white all over the wing span to pick out its unique details. Once that's done, we're going to start with Koala Green Shade. This is a bluish green, and we're going to water it down quite a bit with water. Make sure you have filtered water, because I keep forgetting to take my own advice on this, but filtered water will, when the stuff dries, it won't leave white things in it. You'll notice if you do too many washes. So basically what I did was I took Koala Green Shade and diluted it heavily. It'd be more accurate to say I got some Koala Green Shade in my water. And basically, so in the pictures, his wings go from blue at their base to brown at their tips. And so I just apply a layer of Koala Green Shade from the base going out, like maybe less than a third out, and then I hit it with a hairdryer, rapidly dry it, and then I repeat this repeatedly, probably like 5 or 6 times because of how thin it was, but I had plenty of control, but this took a while. And then I did the same thing with Sepia. At like the second third-ish, I did the same thing. Very thinned, applied it all over, and hair dried it to make it dry, and then just rapidly keep going through layers and layers and layers and layers. And it looked pretty decent. And then is where I made my big mistake. I could have left it as is, and I had to spend a lot of time fixing it. So what I did was with Druchii Violet, I did notice that there was some purple veins along the veins of his wings. And so I took it and I applied it, like diluted a bit, and then applied it along the edges of wings. It spilled out, it was a bit uncontrollable in some areas, and then basically I had to re-clean up the area a bit and then reapply the shadings around the areas here and there. What I should have done is just taken a watered down Druchii Violet and applied it on like less than a third of the top parts of the veins on his wings. That would have been more beneficial, but basically I just had to spend a bunch of time fixing it because it looked terrible after those beautiful color transitions I made. The other thing I did is I took Sepia, like that was pure, and then I put it in all the dense pocket marks in his wings, including the parts that were in the blue. I also applied this on all the chewed out parts of his wings, rotted parts away, to add like more coloring. This is pure or slightly watered down. Now where the wings were blue, I did it with Koala Green Shade, but there were still brown pocket marks in there, but they were a little bit too strong. So with some watered down Koala Green Shade, I applied it into the pocket marks that were in the blue area to soften the hard colors. There's a lot of back and forth. The wings is where I made the most mistakes and I had to go fix things constantly. I could use Pallid Witch Flesh to somewhat fix the purple that was around. It took a while to fix it to make it look nice. I had to keep going back and forth. This took like maybe the focus of an entire Friday. It's like 5 or 6 hours total. Alright, with Daemonette Hide, Xerxes Purple, and Pallid Witch Flesh, we're gonna paint something. Oh, and Lamian Medium. We're gonna paint the his wings. Like there's this hard part of his wings, like part machine, part vein, cable thing. Alright, basically Daemonette Hide all over on this parts of his wings, and then I took Daemonette Hide with Lamian Medium and painted it on the, it's like these cable parts that the veins of his wings feed into this, but it's, so I made like the color transition there be a bit between them, so the Daemonette Hide transitions to the regular vein colors. Once I was done, I took pure Xerxes Purple and painted directly into the crevices, recesses, and parts of that folds of his, whatever these things are. I don't know. When painting Nurgle, I have like no idea what these parts would be called. Just look at the screen. Once that is done, then take Xerxes Purple with Lamian Medium and dilute it and apply it all over. So this creates all the shadows, helps color transitions and stuff. Works pretty well. Once that is done, I then take Daemonette Hide mixed with some Pallid Witch Flesh, and I take a dry brush, the Artist Opus ones, and I just tap 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 all over. I wanted to try this technique because this will create like a good color transitioning stuff. I did this before on a previous model where I painted a scout. I was just testing this. A Space Marine Scout, I tested this stuff and it worked very well. So basically what I did is I did it with a one pass through with this, and then I added some more Pallid Witch Flesh to it, and I added another pass, and it looked great. And then I took pure Pallid Witch Flesh mixed with this, and I just highlighted all the edges and stuff. And I don't show this because, like, I don't know why I don't have the footage, but basically afterwards I did another wash of Xerxes Purple all over to tie the Pallid Witch Flesh highlights to the rest and sort of fix things. Make sure you do it light, thin layers, so Xerxes Purple with a good amount of Lamian Medium to create a light wash to help tie everything together, but not to darken the Daemonid hide too much. Now with Eshin Grey, Fenrisian Grey, and Pallid Witchflesh, we're going to paint the hair on his wings? I don't know. Alright, so basically Eshin Grey all over. Then we're going to take Fenrisian Grey and paint the top half of the edges, the side edges of his hairs with it. Just a solid straight line. And then with Pallid Witchflesh, we'll apply this onto the top third or tip of each hair, depending on the size of the hairs. And that's it. Alright, with Bestigor Flesh, Seraph Sephia, we're going to paint the boils on his wings. Basically, base layer Bestigor Flesh, then Seraph Sephia on top, then a dot of Bestigor Flesh in the middle of the boil, and done. And with AK Interactive Ultramatte Varnish, we apply this all over the wings. Remember to apply a little bit of water in it to get rid of the whitening color of this. So basically, I dilute it. It's probably like a third water, and then I apply 2 coats of it. Now with Heshut Copper, Agrax Earthshade, Sycorax Bronze, and Steel from Vallejo, we're going to paint the metals on the wings. So he has these little 2 brass balls on his wings. Heshut Copper base, Agrax Earthshade, watered down shading, then highlight, which is basically overbrushing at this point, with Sycorax Bronze in the center of these, and then with Steel, we basically, he has like, not veins, but cords going through his wings. So basically, we apply it to our brush, and then we touch our brush with paper towel to get the excess out, because this is pretty runny. It flows great, but it can over pour. And then we just lightly touch each piece of the steel, and it flows perfectly well. Alright, with Xerxes Purple, Daemonid Hide, Pallid Witchflesh, Druchii Violet, and Lamian Medium, we are now painting the robes, the midsection. Yeah. Alright, so basically what's happening is we're going to do a base layer of Xerxes Purple all over the... he has like purple robes on top and teal robes on bottom. Not teal, paper, something. Purple robes anyway. Then once we do that, we're going to take Daemonid Hide and with our dry brush, tap it all over the body, essentially focusing on the raised areas and stuff. And this will create a cloth-like appearance, like raggedy, like the randomness and stuff. Just apply it all over, except in the deep recesses. And once that's done, we're going to do a mix of... actually, I don't. Once that's done pretty well, I then take Pallid Witchflesh and I'll highlight all the edges, the flat edges, the sharp edges and stuff. I actually improve a bit later and perfect my design a bit, but I just leave these robes. These are plain for what I did. Then I take Druchii Violet mixed with Lamian Medium. I make it pretty thin because thinner is easier to control. And then I apply multiple layers on this. Until I get the right shading I like, essentially. So the Druchii Violet will color change the Pallid Witchflesh to be a highlight of the previous colors. It'll fill the recesses, create the shadowing, and it looks pretty decent. Alright, with Rakarth Flesh, Pallid Witchflesh, Bold Titanium White, Seraph Sephia, and Lamian Medium, we're going to paint the white part of his robes. So just to be sure, like the last third of these robes color transition to something else. So we're just going to paint a little bit beyond that so that the color transition will work better in the future. So basically, base layer, Rakarth Flesh, take pallid witch flesh with our dry brush and just tap 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 it all over, create the cloth-like look. Bold titanium white, gonna highlight all the edges, folds, tears around there. And this is something I didn't do with the purple robes. This actually brings out the character or color a bit better. Essentially, I do a straight line on the folds, and then I do a lot of horizontal slashes all the way up along the edges of the robes, the folds and raised areas, and this creates a somewhat more cloth-like texture. I didn't do it all the way through. I have done this before where I painted these lines all the way through from one side of the model to the other. A long time ago, some Ulrich character, can't remember his name. But these quick, simple scratches and stuff look decent. And then with Seraph Sepia, watered down with Lamy and Medium, and then with a bit of water to help it flow better, I apply multiple layers of this until it looks good enough. And even though it's not the right color that is like the box art, this looks raggedy and decent enough. Sons of Horus green, Nurgling green, pallid witch flesh, Koala green shade. We're gonna paint the the green parts of his robe. So basically, Sons of Horus green all over the base and spilling a little bit into the white we just did. Now, we will do little scratches into the white part that we painted or the robes that we've already done. And if it gets a bit too much, just touch it with your finger and helps kind of blend it in together, just like taps. Helps remove the paint. Once that's done, we're going to take Nurgling green, and with our dry brushes, we're just going to tap it all over. It creates the cloth-like look. Then we're going to take Nurgling green and pallid witch flesh mix, sort of 1-to-1-ish, and we're going to paint all the hard edges, lines, and stuff like that. And we're also going to do that thing we did where on the sharp edges or stuff where we did a highlight with the line, we're then going to do horizontal slashes all throughout to create more of a textured look. Once that's done, Koala green shade with Lamy and Medium again. And we will apply as many layers as we want to darken it, blend the colors together, and when transitioning the color into the into the white cloth, essentially, we brush it into it, and then we just tap it with our fingers if it's too concentrated or stuff to help blend it better. Alright, with Emperor's Children, Carrion-Bird Crimson, Nurgling Green, Pallid Witch Flesh, and Seraph Sepia, we're going to paint his face. Now, there isn't much room for detail or whatever, so what we're going to do is we're going to start off with his eyes. We're going to do Emperor's Children Pure straight into his eyes and the area around. They're really sunken in. And then we're going to take Carrion-Bird Crimson Pure and just apply it in because it's pretty thin, and the way the model is, there's actually some deep recesses in his eyes. Once that's done, we're going to then apply Nurgling Green to all his face and skin around the area. Then with that out of the way, we're going to do a mix of Pallid Witch Flesh and Nurgling Green and just highlight the areas. Now, because his face is so tiny and stuff, we're going to have to stick to basically just do a bunch of dots, and that'll just apply the smallest amount of paint needed for the face and stuff and just create lines out of that. Once that's done, we're going to take Seraph Sepia, water down a bit, and we're going to apply directly into the folds in his skin and under his eyes and in the back top part of his head to create the shadow. Then we're going to go back and highlight certain areas with Pallid Witch Flesh and Nurgling Green again, and then we're going to add more Pallid Witch Flesh in to make it lighter, create better highlights. And when applying it on such a small area and we need lines, just do taps. Just taps in a row. We'll apply just enough amount of paint, and it's easier to do than some lines if you can't control the brush that well. And with Dawnstone and Fenrisian Gray, we just do the eyes. Dawnstone for the eyeballs, and then Fenrisian Gray for the pupils in the very center. And that's it. And with AK Interactive Mark Varnish again, with 1 part water and 1 part varnish, we apply 2 coats of it all over everything we've painted on the body. Alright, with Heshut Copper, Sycorax Bronze, and Seraph Sepia, what we're going to do is overbrush Heshut Copper on all the brass areas, then a lighter overbrushing on, well, everything we just did, focusing more on the plain areas and the edges, a very light overbrushing, which is basically like a dry brushing at this point. And then Seraph Sepia, watered down a little bit, we'll apply it all over to add some shadow back in. And then with Mornfang Brown, the Oxide color, and Vallejo Steel, we're going to paint the metal parts. So at first I actually take the steel and then I turn the chainmail. I just paint the steel on the chainmail just to save time, and now that all the cloth is done, it's out of the way. So here's what I do. And then take the Mornfang Brown and then I water it down to it's like a thin wash, and I just apply it like in random places as like signs of rust. Then do the same thing with the Oxide color, water down a bit and apply it randomly here and there to show like oxide. I forget to do it on the brass though, but yeah, that's fine. And then with steel, I then take it and I overbrush onto the steel, on the steel chains to create the shining effect on the more raised areas, and it looks pretty good. Moving on to some other parts. So with Corn Red, Mephiston Red, Emperor's Children, Carenberg Crimson, I just forgot about this, and Lamian Medium. So he has two red on his front and back loincloths, essentially. So basically what I do, Corn Red base, Mephiston Red with the brush, dry brush, just tap it all over, create the cloth look. Then with a 1-to-1-ish mix of Mephiston Red and Emperor's Children, do the same thing again, focusing on more of the raised areas and stuff. And once that's done, we're going to take a brush and we're going to paint the fine edges of the cape, the most raised areas and the sharp edges, and then we're going to feather them in or create a bunch of horizontal slashes to create a textured effect. Then with Carenberg Crimson, watered down with some Lamian Medium, we're going to apply as many layers as we need to get a nice shadowy. I think like 2 or 3, but that's how I diluted it. Paint the stitches that he has. So his cloth is held together by stitches on his head and his body. So Mornfang Brown, just one coat on there, and then Steel Legion Drab on the top part of each stitch. It works well. Alright, with AK Terrain's Dark Earth, AK Puddles, Agrax Earthshade Uriel Yellow, and Doombull Brown and Mornfang Brown, I add them in later. We're going to do the base, because it takes like a night to dry. So after finding out the exact position of where the plastic stones are supposed to be, I then fill the surrounding area with AK Dark Terrain's Earth. And I'm like, you know what? I'm tired of this model already. Let's just finish it. So I cover all the stones with the Dark Terrain Earth. I don't bother with the details, and essentially, whatchamacallit, I make sure that the places where the model like attaches to the base isn't filled. It's still colored, but it's not like filled with any matter or terrain or stuff. And then dry out the top parts with a hairdryer and leave it overnight. Once that's done, the next day, Agrax Earthshade all over to darken all the dirt. Then, once that's done, I apply more AK Interactive Dark Earth with a lighter brush. And basically, I'm just dry brushing the dirt on there, so there's a lighter color of dirt. Once that's done, I take the AK Puddles and mix it with a little bit of Uriel Yellow and creates this nice yellow sludge, which used to be the corruption color of like Nurgle's corruption or whatever it is, Nurgle's rot. It used to be a yellowish green, now it's just a pure green. I don't know what happened. They had to change their formula or something, because I now know they do that. Essentially, I then just began applying it liberally all over. All the puddles, areas, and stuff that I made and stuff, I just applied all over, and it looked pretty decent, but it was still two-tone. It was still too flat in color. It didn't pop. So I took Mornfang Brown and dry brush and just dry brushed like pretty much the entire thing. And it was pretty good, but it wasn't there yet. And so I took Doombull Brown and I applied it on all the sharp, rocky edges and stuff to make it look like the edges of the stones and stuff were more pronounced, more bright, essentially. And turned out decent. Alright, time for an experiment. Now, I completely skipped over a recording how I painted the nurglings. You can paint them however. But essentially, I wanted to use them as an experiment for the shifter paints. Again, so essentially what I did was, for their wings, you know how insect wings have like the shininess and stuff? I wanted to try with these, so I chose these three colors from Vallejo shifters. Are basically a paint that changes color where the light hits where you look at it, and I think these would be close enough. Apparently insect wings are completely transparent, and it's the rest of the stuff that sort of reflects the light around it. I don't know. So basically there's two of these guys. What you do is you paint the base layer black, and then you apply gloss varnish onto it, and that's what you need to make these look the best. So for the first one, I did the Vallejo Shifters Bright Gold Brown all over, which is the white bottle. And then I applied the pink bottle in sparse areas, and then the gold bottle in other sparse areas. And it didn't look that good. I guess I probably left too much of the pink in there, so now you can see like sections that are a bit more pink than others that don't color change. I think it's because I added too much. Then the other one, what I did was part of it I did with each color essentially. One part, like a third of the wing was with one color, a third was another, just like different streaks alternating, and the other color in there. I basically just mixed a bunch of colors in random areas, and the second one looked pretty decent. The color is nice. So basically what it's showing is that you can't lay these colors on top of each other. You basically have to apply one or two coats of this color on one area. And not a thick layer either, just a thin layer, and it'll work pretty good. Alright, last thing, well, one of the last things. Eshin Grey, Dawnstone, Fenrisine Grey, Sons of Horus Green, and Castellan Green. We're going to paint the smoke. I think I messed it up with this, but I made this more complicated than it should have been. So basically, Eshin Grey base layer on all the smoke, then Dawnstone with the dry brush. I didn't dry brush. I just took it and just tapped it all over, create like the cloth effect, but like could also be like a smoke effect. Then I did the same thing with Fenrisine Grey on parts that I hit with Dawnstone. Basically, Eshin Grey all over, Dawnstone is around 90%, Fenrisine Grey is about 80-70%. Then Sons of Horus Green, I did the same thing again on the last half of the smoke trail, or the top half. How do I describe it? The base layer is the darkest, the top layer becomes more green. And then with Castellan Green on the very tips, here and there. And maybe, I don't know, the smoke stacks were very abstract. There's some smoke coming out from where this nurgling's holding it, and it looks pretty, like, understandable. But these random shapes and stuff was hard for me to get, like, this is up, this is down, kind of. It was hard for me to figure out how to color transition it. But it looks okay, but it's not that bright colored, but that's kind of what I was doing, sort of. Kind of, maybe, I don't know. And, yeah. And then once that's done, I get to assembling, and man, it was fast here on this video and stuff, but it took me like an hour to assemble this. Goodness. And interestingly, some of the parts aren't even glued in. They like wrap around them, like his arms are not glued in. Parts of the arm wrap around and grab on the other side, and so some of these pieces are like snapped on, not glued on, surprisingly. Ugh. I am almost done. Castellan Green, Euro Yellow, and AK Puddles Diorama. I really like that slime I made. So basically, there's a few areas where it's like he has like slime or stuff or like flesh blended together. I'm just going to make it slime. So Castellan Green base, I can only find 3 of them on his left arm, particularly, on the front and back of the shoulder pad, and his face mask has it. So basically Castellan Green base, and then I take the AK Puddles, mix in a bit of yellow to make that yellow sludge, and then I apply it on top. And that's pretty much it. It's done. I'm free. Oh my god, this took forever. Attaching the nurglings to the base also was me gluing them on and then applying the AK Interactive dirt around them so that they blend better. So this took me a month. I didn't think it would take that long, but I sort of felt it in my bones it would take this long. And well, I have finally done it. I have painted every single Traitor Primarch for 40k, not 30k. I'd love to do that Fulgrim one, but man, that'll take time. For me, the thing that slowed me down the most was, past me did say it right. He's pretty straightforward and simple. His pieces of his body are sectioned off, so they're easy to organize and do. The thing is, though, there was a lot. Well, I'd never know. I experiment a lot constantly. Essentially, I just experiment a lot, and I spent more time staring at the model, thinking how to paint it, than actually painting it. The actual brush on the model stuff, that was short. But trying to figure out how to get things to work right. Also, the method of using a lot of washes took a long time. I didn't use oils, but oils are better for like low-level troops in their quality, because oils actually take a while for drying time and curing time overnight, so you have to plan things around, and there's so many steps in this that if I used oils, it would take me forever. More than a month. And for me, it took a month. I'd probably say like this was probably like 15, 20 hours, maybe 25 at the most of work. But it's just, I don't have that much time to dedicate to painting. I need to have my mind completely awake and focused so I can stare intently at these things and hold my breath and carefully brush. But man, times are tough. I have rough jobs. So anyway, so as far as it goes, overall, the model grew on me. Like at first, I thought that I wasn't doing too well. You know what, let me focus on the things that came out really well. So, the armor looks great. It was very, very close to the stage model, or the artwork of the painter. However, the only differences between them and me is I ended up having a overall different color compared to the box art model, like a slightly different shade of green, as well as the box art has a bunch of scratches, like thin, like nurgling green, like scratches or chips all over the armor and along every hole in his armor. So I didn't add that because it would take forever. Other differences, I basically followed the correct color scheme. His wings came out great, and then I messed them up, and then I had to spend forever to fix them. So the wings took longer than they should have. That's what you get when you experiment. It's very interesting. The metals turned out very well. The base layer, the highlights, the undercoating, the washes and stuff to create a base layer for basically dry brushing or overbrushing metallic paints as a fine highlight on them really went very far. Like, I feel like my metals on him are really good. And also, they didn't take a long time to paint, all things considered. Like, very fast, very easy. Paint went on because it was mostly washes, so it flowed very well in a controllable state. His scythe, the metal, the crisscrossing lines of steel on there really looked really nice. It's like his scythe looks pretty good, and it's interesting when you have a bunch of like lines of metal. It reflects in a very interesting way compared to if it's all colored metal. Apart from that, the robes look really good, even though they're purple. It's like I wouldn't associate purple with the Death Guard, but the color transitions from the light blue teal to the other colors look great. The wings look great. Taking the dry brush and tapping for texture and for spreading paint is really quick. It happened very quickly. It was very fast. I was surprised. Other things, the base, it's not great, it's not like legendary, but it's passable, it fits in. If you look at the model, the base is not going to be like, terrible and detract from the model. The base is not going to uplift the model, but the base is going to blend in with the model, and you're just going to like take them together essentially. The base doesn't bring the model down. The nurglings, they took a bit of time, but they're basically the same thing as everything else. You can paint them however. The metals on the chain seem pretty decent. Overall, it's pretty good. The only thing that's a bit weird was his face. It was very simple, plain. A lot of crevices. It was like deep crevices of a face, if that makes sense. It's a strange one. I'm genuinely not sure if I did good on his face or not, but it's just the way it's made. So overall, like looking at it once it was complete, like at first I thought he doesn't look that cool or like that interesting, or like he's not as his highlights are not as bright and his shadows are not as dark. After all that, assembling them all together, which was very difficult to do because my goodness, like where do you grab, where do you hold on to trying to apply some of these things? It was like a Jenga puzzle or like a Rubik's Cube trying to find out where can I hold the model and attach the next thing. This was a very rough one. It was very difficult to do, but man, it overall, you know what, it actually grew on me. I actually wasn't liking some of the things of how they turned out, but is it a 10 out of 10? There was a lot of experiments. The little nurgling wings have some interesting aspects. Is it a 10 out of 10? I'm gonna say no. I don't know. I don't know. I can't. It doesn't feel like it. Is it a 9 out of 10? All things considered, if it's not a 9, it's a very high 8. But I'm going to say a 9 because when everything came together, it like elevated it. It looked better when it was together than when it was in pieces. The smoke didn't turn out as good. Basically, the color transitions from the dark to the light and the green at the end didn't work how I would have wanted. It just didn't. But I couldn't really figure out like or even envision what I wanted. The hairs on his wings look great. His wings look great. The color transition on his wings look great, but they took so long to do. The cloth looks great. The purple cloth, though, I didn't go as far as the white cloth or the teal cloth, so they're not as high quality. The cloth on his face, though, or his head, is higher quality, though, because it has more texture in it. The nurglings are fine and passable. His scythe is unusually bright compared to him in the metals department and stuff, so, like, yeah, I'm going to say he's a 9. Overall, all things considered, a lot of the things about him are elevate. Things that I could do better to improve. Number 1, his armor. Even though it's really close to the box art and it's really good and far better, the box art actually has a bunch of chips and stuff around that would have added way more character, and there's more brighter, like stronger light green or rich with yellow on the more raised areas where the light hits on the box art compared to this, and I did notice that, but like I was like, I have so much to paint, it's going to take a while. I was like, I'm good with where I'm at, so I intentionally didn't try to go farther. Apart from that, next, yeah, brass looks pretty good for how I did it. It was very easy to do, pretty interesting. Yeah, it's a 9 out of 10. It's a good model. It took forever. My God. All right. So as far as it goes, I'm gonna say it's a 9 out of 10. I am going to put it up on eBay, but I don't really want to sell it, but I really should for like the health of the channel, recycle the money I got from YouTube to be able to paint more things. I got a bunch of other two other suggestions when I asked what to get, when I was asking if I should get Mortarion or something else. And I would go on to those suggestions, but basically I'm going to put it on eBay, but man, I'm going to put it at a price where, like, I don't want it to sell, but if you pay this much, I'll probably like maybe $250 or $300. Because it took me a month. And, like, if I ever start a Death Guard army, I don't want to paint Mortarion again. How can you rush perfection? Or how can you perfect perfection? Anyway. Overall, it was a great model. I have now painted all of the Traitor Primarchs. Not a single Loyalist Primarch. And that's because the Lion sold out when I tried to grab him. Well, anyway, alright everyone, so like the video if you like the video, comment if you want to comment, share if you want to share, any observations or whatever, and more to come whenever. Bye.